Hey, welcome to Men on Everything, our show where we talk about everything. That's why we call it Men on Everything. I'm Tony Scott. It's Marc Clarke in New York City, and from the Boom Boom Room at WHUR in Washington, D.C. is Troy Johnson. What's up, fellas?
Yeah,
Man,
I can't
You
call
can't
it,
call it
man.
dog. Man, lots of happenings. I was watching Marc's On the Marc yesterday. You can follow Marc on YouTube and get his On the Marc. He does it live from his studio. I guess you're doing that during your show. You talked a little
yeah,
bit about
yeah. Don't tell the boss.
Adrian Peterson, who was deactivated for a game, was charged with was it endangerment or injury to a child, and has since posted bond. Went back to Minnesota, did not play against New England, but is back on the team and activated, and will play this weekend, as far as we know as of today. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
but then last
Yeah.
night came news reports that he was being investigated for yet another episode of a similar behavior with another child.
But I think that was in the past. I think wasn't that in June?
It was something that happened in the past. And speaking of the past, last year, one of his sons was
Yeah,
killed in a domestic violence incident with
another man
the
involved.
another man that was dating his one of his
But it
exes.
was our
And he
understanding, though, Troy. And tell me if I'm wrong, but Adrian didn't even know that son existed. Correct?
he
Well,
met him
He met
once.
him
He,
once.
he just met
Okay.
him.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Well, I don't know, man. This little boy that he took a switch to. Um, I don't know, man. To me, it's hard to defend, especially when you read the little boy had defensive wounds. He put his hands up, right? The little boy
Yeah.
had wounds to his groin. What does that? Was it a whooping that turned into a beating because Adrian lost control?
Well, I think, as I mentioned in my thing, I sadly, Tony, I think this is not uncommon. This is not uncommon. I mean, people always talk about the switches they got. The
hmm
groin, the defensive wound, yes, the hand, and when you put your hand back there, your parents said, "Move your hand," or "I'll." My mother's favorite line was, "I'll break your neck," which was
That's
I
very endearing.
Love you,
very.
mom. Love you, mom.
um,
Yeah.
quit crying before I give you something to
Mhm.
cry about. This beating is what I'm crying about, actually. Uh,
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
so I think this is a good. I mean, I think it's a wake up call for parents and those of us who, in the past, who believed in corporal punishment. I think you can't
Well,
do that.
a couple things. Couple things, though, man. One, last night during your on the mark segment, you spoke about spanking your child at a mall and having a come to Jesus moment when you saw your reflection in the window, and that
Right.
that was that was man, that was. I mean, you and I have been friends for a long time, and you've never told me that, and for you to and you don't hold anything back. You never have, and for you to reveal
Right.
something like that, to admit that yes, you are human and you have had these moments too was quite telling. If you want to see Marc say that again, watch him on the Marc on YouTube. I'll link you to it down below. But that is one thing that I applaud you for being open about that. But the other thing is that Charles Barkley says it's a cultural thing, which I could not disagree with more, because I've known plenty of people who are not African American or from the South who have told me stories about them having been whipped with or beaten with a garden hose, with Hot Wheels tracks. Remember the old orange Hot Wheels tracks with an extension
Yes,
cord,
of course.
those kinds. So it happened. It happens everywhere. And a lot of people say, well, that's how it is. That's how it should be. We should go back, but we can't go back. That's the thing. We cannot go back to that time anymore. We're not allowed to go back. Lynching used to be okay back in the day. Depending on who was on what end of the rope. So you can't we
Right.
just there's certain things that we have to leave in the past. It used to be okay to smack your wife to get smack her back to reality. Can't do that anymore. It used to be impossible to rape your wife. That's not true anymore. That's just we live in a different world, and if you are not willing to adapt, then you're going to face the consequences. Is Adrian Peterson a bad man? Well, based on one episode, I would say no. He's human. It might have gotten out of hand. But if it's happened more than once to any of his other children, then I have to question his parenting skills. I have to question whether or not he's a child abuser or not. That's just because it's our job. Yeah. It's our job to protect children. Our children, even someone else's children, when we feel like it's better to raise a flag and be wrong than not raise a flag and be right.
Well, I think that's the thing where it's a just like, I guess, Ray Rice, the overkill of seeing the video and the conversation. People say, "Oh, we're tired of seeing it." I think we're reaching a place in the road, fork in the road, where, like you said, for those people who believe in corporal punishment, you got to do a gut check, because you like you said, Tony, there are, most people will agree you should never strike a woman, but those same people will be okay with striking their children. And I think we've reached a place, a fork in the road, where as parents you have to say, well, is this really effective? Because how many people, guys, have we heard say, and comedians, the whole joke, you got to beat your kids. That's a problem. I mean, when you say it's cultural, Tony, I think the confusion is, if you in a room full of black people, if you say, when a comedian says white people don't beat their kids and black people beat their kids, and that's the problem, most of those people in the audience, black people, would agree, and most of them have had experiences where beating was a part of it, and I don't know if that would be called cultural. I don't know if it's what we call. I don't know what it's called.
Is it a black thing? Is it a black thing? No, I don't think it is.
Almost a black. It's like how many people know His Eyes on the Sparrow? If you did a poll, most black folks would probably know that song, or most black people would have an experience with it. But then again, maybe most white people too. I don't know. But I can't answer it. But it's interesting.
We talked about this yesterday during the talk around town on NBC4, and it was interesting because the folks that I talked to, essentially kind of relating what listeners have said about the story, them weighing in on it. First of all, the facts are 90% of Americans have spanked their children. Okay, so that throws the cultural aspect, the ethnic aspect out of it. It's something that many parents have done. The second thing is, it's legal. It's legal in all 50 states to spank your child. And in 19 states, they can be spanked in a school district. So I think people that's the legal aspect. That's what some people are weighing in on. But you're going to have to have a cultural shift, a cultural change, if you want people to stop doing this. Now, all the research that I was reading about was kind of centered around, spanking has a short-term effectiveness. If your kid does something right then, bam, and they get a spanking, then that modifies their behavior for the moment. But in terms of a long-term thing, it's just not going to work according to most psychologists. And it's something that you use in corroboration with other things, like taking privileges away and having a timeout, or you got to do more than one thing. How about having a conversation?
But some people say, can you have a conversation, an effective conversation with a 4-year-old? Most people would say no, and most people would be wrong.
Well, you know what? I much like Marc, I had the same kind of moment with my son. The last spanking that I gave him was at age 6. And it was a similar situation. I was enraged at a level that I hadn't been before. And I noticed that we're not getting any further, because essentially I'm setting him up for an opportunity to fail. So if it was a counterpoint. If he does something, I told you not to do that, he's going to do it. Then I come back, I told you not to do it, then he'd do it again. And then there's a consequence it's right around the corner, and then bam. So it wasn't working. After that point, I decided that there's got to be a better way to do this, and I never spanked him again, because to me as a parent, it was more important to invest the time and conversation around why are you doing certain behaviors. Let's get to the root of the issue and let's resolve the problem, because I think parents, my opinion, I think parents are very reactionary. They want whatever the problem is to stop right then and there, because they got to cook dinner, because I got to go to work, because I ain't got time for the foolishness. Whatever the case may be, it's all about you as a parent.
That's
You're
true.
raising children. And more important than that, and this is my last point, Tony, you're not raising kids, really. What you're doing is you're raising adults.
That's a good point.
Your kids are going to become adults. And the viewpoint that people are thinking they're raising their kids, when you realize that you're raising adults, it changes your perspective. Because spanking, and then if it's excessive, that's a learned behavior. Nobody came along when you had a kid and handed you a belt when you started raising your child. You're doing what you saw your parents do, or what some other person influenced you to do. So what do you think your kids are going to do when they're old enough?
The line is really blurred, though, between spankings and beatings. You know, I always thought of spankings as
it's not blurred when you get one.
Being an open-handed swat, repeatedly. You know,
right?
To me, a beating was anything else, anything that involved something that wasn't attached to your body. You know, it just seemed like that was more of a beating. I don't know. You know, people are quick to say you can't tell me how to raise my kids. We cannot. We can't tell you how to raise your kids. No. The law can tell you what you can and cannot do. I would not attempt to tell you how to raise your children, because I don't think there's any one formula, and every child is different. But I don't think any 4-year-old deserved what he got from Adrian Peterson. That's just me. I just feel that way. Ray Rice is still in the news. He's planning on appealing his suspension. I think part of his basis is the double jeopardy. I always thought double jeopardy applied to like the court of law. I didn't know it applied to NFL suspensions, because he's saying he can't be suspended twice for the same thing. Well, you lied. You lied. So that changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah, I think that's going to be. I think that's going to be pretty weak. But what's the other thing they're thinking about? Well, the NFL is under such scrutiny now. He might get a chance to be reinstated because of the NFL's mistake.
And the Players Association.
You're right. If that didn't exist, then that appeal I think would be pretty weak. But the fact that these questions about what the NFL saw, the team saw, all that stuff is making it impossible.
But it's going to come down. It's going to come down to the behavioral clause in his contract. You know, I'm pretty sure every contract in the NFL is standard with, you know, protect the brand, what's best for the league, that kind of thing. Because I really don't think the NFL gives a damn that Ray Rice, you know, knocked out his wife. I think they're more concerned about protecting the brand. I don't think they're and what business really would be, you know.
Sadly. The NFL Players Association hasn't said anything, but of course they're going to look out for the players in this situation. If there's an avenue for them to explore, they're definitely going to do it. And I mean, we have seen the NFL do several backflips and somersaults in this situation. You know, most sports talk shows are saying, you know, especially in Baltimore, are saying, you know, if the league suspended him for 6 to 8 games, gave him a substantial penalty, one that the public would be, you know what, that's about right, he'd likely still be with the Ravens. Well, but because I'm just saying, you know, the NFL, for whatever reason, and we're going to find out why Roger Goodell did not hand out a harsher penalty, why they didn't see the video. All those things are yet to be determined. But it just kind of puts it in a different perspective. If he had just been given a strict punishment, you know, from the get-go, from the giddy-up, then we probably would be seeing a different scenario. This may not have blossomed into what it has turned into.
The fact that we saw, like I said last week, we hear about domestic violence. You know, we know people who've been victims of domestic violence, but we've never seen it actually happen unless you were the giver or the recipient of domestic violence. So we saw this tape. And to me, that changed the whole dynamic. This is why Ray Rice is getting the wrath of the world, is because we saw if Roger Goodell had given him half the season off with no pay and some other things, I think that tape may not have ever come out. You know?
Exactly.
But because he got only 2 games, it was like, he got 2 games for what? Y'all ain't see what he did. And that's why the tape, I think that's why the tape came out, because 2 games was an insult to so many people. And the other thing was Ray Rice's high school coach invited him to one of the high school football games, even though the school really didn't want him there, which to me sent a horrible message. If you're the coach, when you're the coach of a football team, you teach unity and everything is for the team. Well, the team, in this case the school, decided that we didn't want Ray coming to a game, and yet the coach did it on his own anyway. So what kind of message does that send?
Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that I get confused about this is almost like relationship.
That's Ray Rice calling right now.
I know. It's like relationships. People are like, he don't need to play football right now. He need to get his life together. And let's say the coach, extending an olive branch to try to help this young man. He don't need to be at a damn game. He needs to get his freaking life together. I love you, Ray. Get your freaking life together. People are very interesting. It's just like with loved ones. Yeah. Sometimes you have to take the hard road, or sometimes you deserve the hard road to get your life together. And in those moments, it doesn't mean I don't love you any less. It means that you need to get your freaking life together. And I'm so sick and tired of Ravens fans trying to, because they're fans, being blind.
Loyalty is a dangerous thing, Mark.
Oh, yeah. Because people are loyal with families. No, get your life together. In another note in football, I'm sorry, a linebacker for the Cardinals, he used to play for Atlanta forever. This dude has brain injury, and he's coming back to play this week. And people are like, yay! He complained of memory loss. He was arrested a couple of times in his car. He obviously is starting to have these side effects from multiple concussions. Oh, they're saying John Abraham. Yeah. And they say this is his first concussion. Obviously, he's had many concussions. He just doesn't diagnose with them. But the blind loyalty of these fans or people's selfishness to want people to play football is crazy. Sit down. Ray Lewis don't need to play football right now. He needs to get his life together. His wife should say the same thing. Leave us alone. Let us get our life together. Instead, she's fretting because he's not playing next Sunday.
To go back for a second to the Adrian Peterson thing, I don't know if you saw Chris Carter on ESPN Sunday.
Very good.
What he said, what needed to be said, and that is that his mother was wrong. And parents, as much as we think of our parents and how great they are, they do make mistakes. And there are things that our parents have taught us that are wrong. And you talk about blind loyalty. That's we have to acknowledge that things your parents may have said to you or taught you or done to you, not everything, and by far probably in most cases probably 1% was wrong. And for him to say something like that, to me, it needed to be said. And I applauded that so much. I posted the video up on talking360.com because I thought it needed to be said. That, talk about an 800-pound elephant in the room. That was a huge thing. Kanye West at a concert demanded that everybody stand up. And when a couple people,
everybody,
I guess he must have hella vision, because when those lights are on the stage, if you can see out into the audience that far back, you got some eyes on you, right? And
he had those limo tint glasses on, man. I think he thought it would cut all the light out.
Two people who were not standing, turns out they were handicapped. One of them had a prosthetic leg that she was waving in the air to show, but he sent his bodyguard supposedly down there to verify, and then he gets criticized for it, and then he gets mad because he got criticized for it. And to me, Kanye, here's the deal, man. Kanye, it's okay to make a mistake. You're human. You make a mistake. You made a mistake. That's all. It's just 2 words you need to learn. I'm sorry. That's it. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I was wrong. I was insensitive. I was wrong. Let's move on. But you pour gasoline on the fire because now you raise hell because you're being criticized, saying that, the media has other things to do besides, pick on him. They ain't picking on you. They're picking on a mistake you made. And if anybody me, if I got on stage being a quasi-celebrity and said something like that, they come after me too. Maybe not as hard. It wouldn't make the national news, but somebody would write about it. It would get out.
I saw it happen before. Tony was chased out of the Fox Theater once for doing that.
Well, it
didn't make no sense.
Y'all was gonna bring that up ever, man.
Yeah. But it is interesting what he says. What he says is true though too. It's like, because it's Kanye West. It's very interesting. This is a lead story. Is it a lead
No.
story? I don't know if
it's
it's a
not
lead
a lead
story.
No.
And a part of you goes, because whatever happens at concerts, crazy things happen all the time. But it is interesting, like you said, if he said, "I'm sorry," in the concert, would it be a story even? I don't know. But it is interesting.
Did you see the video?
Yeah, it's up on the website.
Yeah.
If he had said "I'm sorry," it might have still been a story, but
It's not a story. First of all, it's not
it is a story because he's a celebrity. He's a celebrity.
Yeah,
but
it's a celebrity story.
That's the story that goes on right before the weather during the news.
But it's bled into not a celebrity story. What I'm saying is, I've seen this as a lead story.
No, it's not a lead story.
Oh, on what?
You know
what I mean? Like when
I don't know what you've
maybe
been
on
watching.
Entertainment
No,
Tonight
what I'm
or
saying
something
is
like that.
top story. When you look at the news, what are those called? Stories that are top stories.
Like a trending story.
Yeah.
Well,
it's kind of like that's not really a story.
That's not
a story. You're in a concert and the artist says stand up and people don't stand up. That's not a story.
No,
Well, it's not a story until you pick
it's
on
not
two
trending.
handicapped people. That's when it becomes a story.
Yeah. But it's not. It's trending because that's what people are looking at. Not because the news is saying, "Hey, this Kanye West story is a top story over Ebola." No, that's what these people that ain't got nothing else to do at work, they click on the Kanye West story, and the hits are showing that it's a story that people are responding to.
We're not going to see an interview. We're going to see Matt Lauer, like Kanye West said, interview Kanye West, and people talk about getting him in to talk about the story.
I hope not. Or bringing the young lady with a prosthetic leg.
I hope not. I hope not.
When Kanye West puts out another album or has another tour or there's something that goes on that's newsworthy and he needs to see Matt Lauer in 3 months, they're going to bring it up and ask him about it, but you're not going to see it anytime now.
In our kind of our media, and because, like you say, we've kind of crossed from social media to news or whatever, you see stories that aren't stories be stories. And it's just very interesting. I think who they select to cover, you know what I mean, as a story. I don't know. It's very interesting to me.
Is the Danielle Watts situation, is that a story? Danielle Watts is the actress who was in Django Unchained, and she was handcuffed for public display of affection with her white boyfriend, and someone actually called in and said there was a sexual act going on in the car. But is that a story?
It's a story only because of the heightened level of stories on race and police and the fact that she's an actress. But that one could have got on board because of the overwhelming all the stories that are coming out with the police and racial relations. It's kind of like, because I didn't even realize she was that. I watched that. That's one of my favorite shows, but I didn't realize that was even. I thought that she was just an actress. You know what I mean? But I think what caught my ear was the story. Police think she's a prostitute.
Why? Because she's black and she's with kissing a white man.
Well, they were
back to those rights and rules that we have as citizens. I think most people, if the cop says, "Hey, give me your ID," I think most people are like, "Okay," but not realizing that you don't have to give.
You see, I never knew that. I mean, I knew that before this happened, but most of my life, I was always of the assumption that when a cop says, "Let me see your ID," that you're required to do it. I know that's how I was raised. Exactly. I mean, you're raised when a cop tells you to do something, you do it. That's how I was raised. And I think people of color really are raised that way because we don't want nothing to jump off. Like you say, what's the charge, officer? We weren't taught that part by our parents. I think our parents are trying to protect. This is where the body camera comes into play.
That's right.
So,
can we go back to Kanye for a second? I just wanted to say because I was I don't know what happened to the internet here, but Kanye is an ass clown. Okay, I just wanted to make that.
we had to go back. We had to go back to you and clarify that one.
I want to go back to. I didn't get a chance to say it. But come on, man. It doesn't matter. I don't care about where it shows up in the news, any of that stuff. No, Kanye, time and time, and he's from my hometown in Chicago. He is a 100% certified ass clown.
and there's the title to today's show, man. Kanye West is an ass clown. That's what we're going to call this one.
That's right.
Man, I mean, to me, he made it more of a story than it should have been.
Now, it was funny, though, when he realized that the person is paralyzed and in a wheelchair. Then he was like, oh, okay. He just... And going directly into his song, "I'm Good."
I ain't saying she's
So
a gold
everybody,
digger.
yeah, everybody who was sitting in their chair because they had no other choice was good until you started asking questions. That's why you're an
But
ass
that's
clown.
the other thing too. If I buy a ticket to an event, I've essentially bought a seat. And as long as I'm not raising any kind of hell or being a distraction, I don't have to stand up if I don't want to. I bought the seat. I can sit down. I have a right to sit down and keep my butt in that seat. I mean, you can't make me stand up. You want to stop the show because I'm not standing. Stop the show, but I'm not causing a distraction.
That's right. And you don't have to stand up if you can.
That's the most important thing too.
That's what you really need to know.
I want to.
I want to stand. Trust me, if she could stand up, she would.
You have no idea how much I want to stand up right now.
I don't know. ISIS beheaded.
I do love Kanye West. So I will say that.
ISIS beheaded.
I love it. ISIS
beheaded another man from the UK, and I don't know, man. This I don't. Is it designed to put the fear in Americans or the world to fear ISIS? I don't know. Is it working? I think to some degree it may be working, man. Especially if you've got loved ones who are abroad. You know, it's just one of those. I mean, we're not used to that, and especially Americans. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. I mean, that's what we're so shocking about 9/11. That don't happen over here.
Yeah, I think we're so decent. We're fortunate to live where we live, and we've kind of said this before about just having a better understanding of what happens in other places around the world. We have to consider ourselves as world citizens. So, you know what? If terrorism is not brought to our front doorstep, we're fortunate. But that means it's going someplace else. You know, and I think people are like, we ain't got to deal with that. And they wipe their hands of it. But the next thing you know, when somebody from ISIL decides to return to Wisconsin or to, Florida or wherever the hell they came from, and then decides to blow up a mall or do something crazy, there's no telling. Then we're going to be asking those questions. How could this happen? How did this happen here? There are people that live in places where, even if it's not war torn, people that live in Cuba, they don't know if they're going to have lights for 3 hours today or 2 hours or 6 hours, just because that's the way it is. So we're so fortunate to be where we are. I was looking at the documentary called The Mall on HBO about the bombing at Westgate Mall in Nairobi, that terrorist attack by Boko Haram. And, they had a lot of security footage and people were recalling what happened. And one guy who was laying low heard terrorists come into a room and ask a woman whether or not she was Christian or Muslim. She said she was Christian, and the terrorist shot her right there. He didn't hesitate. So, I mean, we're talking about a small group of terrorists who, had some AK-47s. Maybe they had they were armed, heavily armed, but not with full military gear or all that stuff, shirts and jeans and stuff like that. These guys were praying because they knew they were going to die. They didn't give a damn. They knew what they were there to do. They knew they weren't leaving that mall. And Westgate Mall is like, it's like going to the Galleria in St. Louis. It's just it's an upscale mall with people from all parts of the world that happen to be there on that specific day. There's no rhyme or reason as to why. It's just unfortunate they were in the mall. But Boko Haram, found that successful, and they're like, we hope there are 100 more Westgates. Wow. We pray that we can have 100 more.
Well, I think Troy, what you're saying, you're right. I think it's overwhelming. See, this is where it's a tough. You and I go back and forth on this. on one hand, people are uninformed, right? But when you start to be informed about what's going on in the world, your take on the U.S. changes.
Mm.
You know, from ISIS to the different cells that have operated across the world as terrorists. When you do your research, at some point they've worked with the U.S. or not. The weapons oftentimes that they use, or that we fight them, they're fighting us with our weapons. You know, there's all this going on. And like you said, just as terrible as asking someone, are you a Christian, and taking them out, the collateral damage caused by the U.S. or whomever, when we go after ISIS or these countries where we kill thousands of kids and people who happen to be Muslim or happen to be wherever or happen to be in that part of the country, it's a Pandora's box that is very confusing and it's very overwhelming. And I think, like we started the conversation with the beheadings, Tony, I think that's kind of what happens. It's overwhelming. Like, it's almost like, I think there's a part of us in the United States, because we are spoiled, because we are used to things being taken care of. It's almost like, wow, you can behead like 8 people or whatever, and no military. We're not any closer to taking this group down, and they're just terrorists. I don't care how much money they're saying they're getting every day. That's overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You say, well, wait a minute. We're the most powerful country in the nation, and with our allies, we can't take out a bunch of terrorists. So I think all these factors come to play, and I think Troy, that's why I think people do kind of weave in and out of paying attention and kind of not paying attention. I do think that, sadly, because we are desensitized, these beheadings, it almost is not effective anymore for what they're trying to do, even like to get people fired up or fearful. I think people are overwhelmed. I think people are kind of overwhelmed.
You know what? There's still going to be people traveling in parts of the world. Like the British man who was killed was an aid worker. He was trying to help people.
Yeah.
You know, and not just in he was in Serbia trying to help people there before he was in Iraq and Syria. I guess he was in Syria. So, you don't know who this is going to happen to. They're trying to terrorize, in this situation, us, America, Great Britain, the Allies. But like I mentioned before, while they're beheading 1 or 2 Americans and a British citizen, they're slaughtering 300 Syrian soldiers. They're slaughtering Muslims that don't believe the same thing that they believe. Now, that's for those areas, because one person doesn't impact, because they've seen so much death and destruction. You know what I'm saying? That's why this group is so sophisticated. They have 2 different messages that they're sending out. You oppose us. If you live here and you don't follow what we do, you're dead.
That's something.
If you keep messing with us, America and Great Britain, then we'll just, we'll kill one at a time or something like that. Kind of seems like that's the way it's shaking out. I do agree. People are passive, but you know what? These things are going to happen whether you're involved or not. But just imagine if we were all just a little bit more well-informed and we're speaking our mind, and maybe, you just never know what impact that would have.
As we wrap up here, one thing that came out here in St. Louis last night in regards to Michael Brown, the 18-year-old who was murdered by a police officer, is still to be determined whether he'll face charges or not. The grand jury has been extended to January. So we may not know. We may know something before then, and we may not know nothing until January. I don't know how that's going to sit with the community here in St. Louis. I really don't. It seems like a lot of people are starting to feel like this man's getting ready to get away with murder. Oh, the government may get him on the federal government may get him on a civil rights violation, but murder and what he did, he's probably going to get away with it. And I think that is really going to be a problem if in fact that happens. I mean, because he's not even being brought to trial. You're telling me you're not even going to bring him to trial? Really?
And so there technically are no witnesses.
Nobody. My understanding is nobody saw exactly what happened when it happened. I've said this. This before. I believe somebody's got the whole thing on videotape on their smartphone somewhere, but they just don't want to get involved at this point, or they don't, or they're scared, or why? Because in my heart, I really believe that. But
all the witnesses that have whatever they saw seem to be corroborating the same story.
Yeah, there was last week. There was a story. There was two white guys who were working in that complex. And, you know, one of them is on videotape saying he had his hands up. You know, in other words, you know, what'd you do that for? He had his hands up, right? And then they saw what was starting to happen and stuff. And he told the other white guy, we got to get out of here. You know, I mean, he's a smart man. I mean, because it was getting ready to get really ugly. But yeah, to Troy's point, everybody pretty much has said the same thing. Has said the same exact thing. And these two guys have no skin in the game at all. You know, they didn't know Michael Brown. They were not familiar with the area. They were working in the area. They were doing their job. You know, they're not friends with the cops or anything like that. They don't know Darren Wilson. So they had no skin in the game. So they said what they saw. And what they saw was Michael Brown had his hands up. Now, like I said, the last thing last night was they saying the grand jury may not come back with anything until January. It may come sooner, but now they've been extended to January, so we'll see. And that's too bad.
Well, they're gonna have to plow the streets because there's gonna be some protesting in January. It doesn't matter when it happens, if it's tomorrow or January. I mean, I salute the community in St. Louis and Ferguson for being vigilant. You know that there are a lot of people who are paying attention. I know there have been quite a few meetings and organizational conversations. So that hopefully is a glimmer of hope that it's not going for at the very least the community is going to make sure that, you know, they're doing what they're supposed to do in terms of making sure they're going to hold people accountable, or at least try to hold people accountable.
Well, that's our show. That's Men on Everything, talking about some of the big topics that are going on in the world and in the country and everything. So thanks so much for watching. If you can give us a thumbs up, if you can subscribe, that would be great. Those things are free to do. You can share it. That would be awesome. All right, we really appreciate that. Sign up for the newsletter at talking360.com. That's Troy Johnson in WHUR in D.C. That's Marc Clarke at Radio 103.9 in New York. I'm Tony Scott in my basement, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching.